Chapter 4. Travelers. "Forget sentimentality," the badger grumbled. "I'd like to see him lose that smell." "And from a badger that's saying a great deal," quipped Cleanclaw. "I will go with them," said Broadfoot. Everyone stared at him. "I can't transport them, but I can act as guide and protector. The three of us should manage." "The four of us," the badger told him. "I will come as well. I haven't put so much time into looking after this young one to stop now." "Lord Wirren, will you and Sirrah come with us?" Numer asked. Dane's mother smiled wistfully. "As a new goddess, I'm bound to Wirren's lands for a century." "As am I, for requesting her admittance here," added Wirren. "You will do well with the badger and Bradfoot." "If we're to leave today, I'd best get a little extra hunting done," commented the duck mole, and he vanished. "I will join you tomorrow morning," the badger said. "There are a few things to deal with at my set before I go." He, too, vanished. "Ma? Da?" the girl said thoughtfully. "Are there horses we might trade for or buy? We'd go faster than afoot." "No, dear one," Sirrah replied. "Every horse in the divine realms belongs to itself or its herd. They do not serve anyone." She rose. "I'd best pack your things. No, Dane, I don't need help. You'd only be in my way." "Besides," added Wirren, also getting to his feet, "I need you both to come with me." He led Dane and Numer inside. "What about making horses?" Numer asked. "Could you—" "No," said Wirren flatly. "Any being created in the divine realms belongs to itself and serves no one else. You would be lucky if such a horse only dumped you in the dirt. It might take you for a ride that would last a century of mortal time." In the main room he opened a door that the girl was positive hadn't been there the day before. It gave onto a small dark chamber that was more like a shed than a room. Here, to her surprise and delight, she saw woodcarver's tools, staffs, boxes of feathers, boxes of arrowheads, coiled strings, and completed bows. Wirren ran long brown fingers over the finished weapons, checking the feel, rejecting this one and that. "These are my gifts to those I favor." He selected an ebony-colored bow with startlingly pale horn knocks over both tips. "And if my own daughter isn't one I favor, who is?" He laid the staff across his palms and offered it to Dane. It was air-light in her grip at first, but it got heavier, until it reached the exact weight she looked for in a bow. Wirren offered a string. Fitting the loop over the lower knock, she braced that end against her instep. She drew the upper knock down and slipped the other hoop over it in a flash. "She's sweet, Da," she told him, smiling. The god offered her a quiver full of arrows. "I should have given you a proper bow long before this," he told her, wrapping extra strings in a square of oiled cloth. Handing it to Dane, he went to the staffs in the corner. "Here, mage." Wirren selected one that was 6 feet of thick knotted wood. About to hand it over, he frowned. A moment. He looked at Numer, then cupped the top of the staff in one hand. White fire shone from his palm. When he drew it away, a fist-sized crystal knob sat on top of the staff, embedded in the wood. He gave the staff to Numer. The mage took it and stood for a moment, one hand wrapped around the wood, the other around the crystal. Dane saw no magical fire, but knew he examined the staff with his gift, looking over its secrets. When he looked up again, his eyes were filled with respect. "Thank you. I've never had something that was so attuned to me." Wirren scowled and went to a wooden counter along one wall. "Come here, both of you." An inkpot and brush appeared on the surface next to him. The god wet the brush and began to paint symbols directly onto the wood. "Here we are," he said, tapping the brush against a painted square. "Here's the stream and the pond where Broadfoot stays, and this is the path you must follow." Dane, following the brush, thought for a moment she saw trees and streams along the dotted line of ink. When she blinked, she saw only glossy black dots sinking into the stained wood. "If you walk steadily, you will spend the night beside Temptation Lake," Wirren informed them, drawing that body of water close to the trail. "Do not drink from it, unless you desire to be tempted, of course." A vision of Numer reclining among 3 naked, lovely women who fed him grapes or rubbed his feet or finger-combed his hair filled the air over the counter. From Numer's deep blush, Dane could tell he saw it too. "Not funny, Da," she told her father, her voice very dry. "Neither of us is in the mood for temptation, Lord Wirren," the mage added quietly. "Humph," snorted the god. Well, just don't drink the water there. It's a good place to stop. No dweller of the divine realms may harm another within a league of Temptation Lake. He re-wet his brush and continued to draw. The trail will carry you to Long Drop Gorge, which you will cross on the first bridge. Briefly, Dane glimpsed a wooden rope bridge in the air over the counter, like the bridges that filled the mountains of Tortle and Gala. Wirren continued the line of the path for an inch or two, then stopped to create a blurred area around it. This is Mauler's Swamp. The vision in the air over the map showed a pair of yellow, slit-pupiled eyes sticking out of murky water. They moved. A ripple of passing square ridges like those on a crocodile's back cut through the image of water, followed by the snake-like curving of a long tail. Give no offense to Mauler if you can avoid it. Here's the stone maze. The vision was one of rock canyons and a distant small river, as seen from high overhead. Watch your footing, never leave the path in the maze, and harm no stones. Lord Wirren, said Numer, it would help if you were to explain what will happen if we make a mistake in these places. Wirren looked at him, leaf-colored eyes glinting. Who can tell? He asked. The gods in most places never punish a trespass in the same manner twice. Mauler once ate the mortals who disturbed his afternoon nap, but that was a while ago. He may not choose to eat the next intruder. Of course, he may have young to share his swamp, and they always need a meal. Just use caution. Cut no green wood. Take no fruits without asking the bush or tree. If you don't, you might spend a century with wild pigs trying to dig you up by the roots. Blackberries in particular have a very nasty streak. Wonderful, Dane whispered. Where was I? Asked her father. He re-wet his brush and sketched another blurred area on the wood. Oh, yes. At last you will come to the sea of sand. The vision revealed dunes. For a moment Dane's face was hot and painfully dry. If the storm wind can't find help, the winds will strip your body of moisture in the time it takes your mother's pan bread to make. Don't you see what folly this is? He demanded, eyes on Dane. The divine realms are too dangerous for a pair of mortals. We will have Broadfoot and the badger, Numer said, and we have protected ourselves from time to time. Mortals have survived in the divine realms before. Wirren sighed. That's what I thought you would say. His brush and inkpot disappeared. Palms down, he tapped the ink surface of the wood. At least I can tell Sirah that I tried. Like bark that was barely attached to its parent tree, the surface with the map cracked away from the wood, thinned until it could have been heavy parchment, and rolled itself up. Wirren gave it to Numer. You need not fear that it will go to pieces or that water will smear the marks, he said grumpily. Dane leaned over and kissed the god's forehead. Thanks, Dad. When the three returned to the main room of the cabin, Broadfoot, dripping, was on the table. Are we ready? Sirah offered them cloaks, a blue one for Dane, a black one for Numer. Once the two mortals had donned them, she handed over their packs. How do you want to do this? Numer asked Broadfoot. You can't use your power to move us, and forgive me, but I doubt that you can walk at our pace. Broadfoot looked at the mage. Numer jumped. Visible through the opening of his cloak, his cream-colored shirt twisted. When it stilled, a deep pouch had formed in the cloth over Numer's belly. The duckmole vanished, then reappeared in shimmering fire, tucked into the pouch. He looked back and up at Numer. The view from here should be very nice, he said as Dane and her mother giggled. Mind you don't bump me. Sirah hugged Dane. You'll come to stay a bit when your war is settled? She asked. Please? I will, Ma. I just don't know when that will be. We'll know. We'll come for you on the holiday that's closest. The woman scanned her face intently. You'll visit for a season or two? I'll come, Ma. Promise? Dane hugged her mother hard, tears in her eyes. I promise. We'll catch up on the time them bandits took from us. Sirah gave her a last squeeze, then turned to Numer. Dane slung her pack and quiver over her shoulders, then looked at her father. Wirren leaned down and kissed her gravely, first on one cheek, then the other. We shall see you again, so what's the point of goodbyes? None at all, she said, and brushed a hand along his horned crown. Wirren opened the door. They filed outside. Straight down the path, instructed Broadfoot. We've a couple of hours of light still. Dane let Numer take the lead. She glanced back only once to see her mother crying in the circle of Wirren's arm. They both waved. She waved too, and didn't look again as the path led her into the woods and out of sight. They walked quietly, descending into a mountain forest on a much-used track. Listening for the voices of the people, as she did in walks at home, Dane once more had that odd sense of being deaf. Her physical ears picked up the rustle of small creatures moving on the forest floor and the many calls of local birds. Magically, she heard nothing. She had no way to know what was said in the conversation between a squirrel and a jay, though she could guess from the rage in the squirrel's voice and the mockery in the bird's. Far in the distance, her sense for immortals registered a small herd of killer centaurs on the move. About to warn her companions, she realized that the centaurs were traveling in the opposite direction. Soon afterward, they faded from her awareness. "Goddess bless," Numer said, coming to a halt. They were in a dark hollow where only slivers of light touched the ground. The cause of the early twilight grew beside the path. A white oak tree, or what Dane thought might be an oak, except that it was the largest that she had ever seen. If she and Numer stretched out their arms, together they still could not reach all the way around the bole. "She is a first tree," Broadfoot explained. "From her acorns the first mortal white oaks were born." "Her?" asked Numer, looking down at his passenger. "She is a god," the duck-mole said. "She is aware. All of the first trees are." Dane snatched her hand away from the bark. Stepping back, with Broadfoot held away from him, Numer bowed deeply, sweeping an arm before him as if the tree were a queen. Straightening, he frowned. "What's that noise?" "What noise?" chorused Dane and Broadfoot. Numer approached the girl, hand cupped around one ear, and bent. "Easy there," the animal god cautioned. Giving Dane a half-turn, Numer put his ear close to her pack. Now Dane heard a thin, high shrilling. Numer opened one of the pack's side pockets and reached inside. When he drew it out again, he brought a small clay pot with a wax seal and a darking. "Now where did you come from?" he asked, holding the blot up to eye level. "Is it the one that's been following me about Daz?" inquired Dane. Shaping a head for itself, the darking nodded. "Were you in my pack by accident?" The inky creature shook its head. "You wanted to come?" The darking nodded. Dane shrugged and held open the breast pocket of her shirt. "Pop it in here, then." Numer hesitated, then dropped the creature into its new residence. "Now we've each got a passenger." She smiled into his face, so close to her own just then. Briefly, his eyes changed. A strange, burning excitement filled them, and made her catch her breath. He straightened abruptly. "We shouldn't dawdle," he said, striding off down the path. "We've a lot of ground to cover." Puzzled, confused, feeling as if she'd glimpsed something important only to have it vanish, Dane trotted to catch up. They walked long after dark, stopping only to eat a brief supper. As night drew down, Numer called light from the crystal on his staff to illumine the way. At last the path emerged from under the trees. They had come to the rim of a stretch of water, a large pond, or a lake. "Temptation Lake?" asked Numer, looking out over the water. "Yes, indeed," Broadfoot said, "and I could do with a swim." Dane sighed her relief and let her bow, quiver, and pack slide to the ground. The thick, lush grass that grew almost to the water's edge looked better than the softest feather bed at that point. Numer first lifted the duck-mole from the pocket in his shirt, putting him on the ground, then removed his own pack. "Broadfoot, if I bespell our camp for protection, will it inconvenience you?" Broadfoot clapped his bill in a laugh. "No, not in the least. Though you don't need to spell it. Temptation Lake is sacred. No one of the divine realms would harm anyone here. If anything does happen, mind," he added, looking at them soberly, "just call or think my name, and I'll come. And remember, don't drink the water." He vanished in a cloud of silver light. Numer gave his pack to Dane. She pulled out folded squares of cloth and spread them. There was more cloth in their folds than she had expected. Laid flat on the ground, they were big enough to wrap each of them completely. Exhausted, Dane stripped off her boots, dagger, and belt, and freed the darking, who vanished into the shadows. "Don't let me step on you," she warned, and heard a squeak in reply. "I hope that means yes," she muttered. Rolling herself in her blanket, Dane watched as Numer gathered rocks, placing them in a circle around their things. Once the stones were placed, he walked counterclockwise around the rim of his circle. She couldn't hear what he said, but when he finished the first circuit, all noise from outside the barrier stopped. He walked the circle again. This time, when he was done, the rocks began to glow faintly. To Dane's surprise, they warmed, throwing off a mild heat without scorching the grass. The third time that he walked his route, black fire glittered with white sparks flowed behind him. When he completed this circle, the magic blazed, then vanished. The only sign that he had done anything was the glow and warmth that came off the stones. "We're shielded from sight and sound." He tugged off his boots. "And the rocks?" she asked. He smiled tiredly. We only have one blanket and a cloak each. You know I don't like to get cold." Using his cloak as a pillow, he rolled himself into his blanket and turned on his side, his back toward her. "Good night, Magelet." Dreams brought Dane once more to that vast empty space. There were the great gods standing in a wheel of linked arms. The focus was a changing thing that wore the colors of the chaos vent. Dane got queasy as she watched its constant shifts. Did others feel ill when she shape-changed? But this time she kept her eyes on Circle and Captive. The creature leaped for a gap between Kadunka and the thief, and was blocked by the white barrier that made a dome between gods and it. The creature shrank into the center of the ring and fell in upon itself until it was a heaving mass. Lightning fast, the mass split into a star, shooting its many arms toward all of the openings between its captors. Each arm of the changing thing sprouted a wide mouth with outsized, jagged teeth. The great gods shifted, and the fiery barrier shone more brightly than ever. The metals shrieked and retreated into the central mass, smoking where they had made contact with the white fire. In the meantime, unseen by the ring of great gods, small puddles of multicolored liquid appeared behind them. The puddles grew, spreading to the left and the right, until they formed a ring at the backs of the great gods. The scene dissolved. Dane was back on the plain, seeing the Master of Dream as he stood poised, 1 foot on each side of a great chasm. He still held a scale in one hand. The foot that rested on the flat side of the crack skidded. He fought to regain his balance on that polished surface without taking his other foot out of the wriggling muck. At last he was steady again. A bubble grew in the strange liquid. When it burst, thousands of exotically colored butterflies swirled around Ganiel in a spiral dance. Dane thought that she'd opened her eyes, but although she could see clouds drifting over a pink and gray sky, it felt as if her dreaming was not over. The sound of oddly muffled voices, coming from somewhere close by, met her ears. In case the voices weren't part of a dream, she wrapped her fingers around her dagger and grew bat ears to hear every word. "You ordered what is left of the Razor Scream Nation to attack those mortals in the harbor. 11 Stormwings were killed out there. 11! That is the cost of battle, Quiriv. Everyone takes casualties." Dane stiffened. It had been 6 months since their last meeting, but there was no mistaking that cold, distant voice. It was Ozorn's. "The cost of mortal battle! When the kings chose to ally themselves with you, it was your promise that while we might harry two-leggers, we would kill only to sow fear." "I lied." There was bleak disinterest in the former Emperor Mage's tone. "We are no army for mustering. We feed on armies," said a cracked and aged voice. "You promised feasting to glut us, not to throw our kindred against archers and mages. Mortal wars are not Stormwing wars." "Jakul," inquired Ozorn, "do you feel Stormwings have no part in mortal wars?" A third female voice replied, "What does it matter if we kill a few or many to sow the fear we dine on? Whether they shoot us for eating the dead or for attacking the living, what difference does it make?" "There, sires, Jakul of the Mortal Fear Nation does not disagree," announced Ozorn, "and her subjects number more than your, sadly reduced, nations combined." "Humans attack on the North Road!" someone cried. "Warriors come!" "Fellow Stormwings, I would love to chat all day, but as you can hear, business intrudes." Ozorn sounded friendly and false. "If you don't mind." He paused briefly. Then in a cold, direct voice, he continued, "Number 14, report your position. Where are you? I can see nothing." Dane's bat ears filled with a voice both closer and louder than her enemy's. It sang a bizarre tune that sounded like nothing on earth. She sat up. Numerous things were packed. The rock circle around their camp had gone cold. 2 stones had been moved to open the last of the protective spells on the camp. There was no sign of Broadfoot either. The sun was clear on the horizon, but not by much. It was time to get moving. If she could just find Numer. She spotted him nearly 100 yards away. He was striding into the lake without even bothering to roll up the legs of his breeches. "Numer!" she called. He gave no sign that he'd heard. "Numer!" He never even looked her way. The water reached his belly. Still he walked on. "Bespelled!" she thought. Jumping up, she raced across the grass and waded in after him. Closing the distance fast, she lunged and grabbed air. He'd gone under. She dove. He was speeding away. Worse, she could see he was not swimming. His arms were flat against his sides. His legs fluttered. Something was towing him. Dane surfaced and gasped, filling her lungs with air as she filled her mind with sea lions. Her body shifted. She dove and arrowed after her friend. She was gaining on him when she realized she was now a saltwater animal in a freshwater lake. Too late to fret, she told herself. I just won't eat or drink here. The thing that towed Numer picked up speed. Dane poured her strength into her rush through the water and drew even with the man. Now she saw his captor. A naked blue female with hair like silver tentacles, she dragged her prize on a gold rope as she sang the weird tune that had captivated Numer. The song pressed on Dane's ears. She flattened them and did her best to ignore it. Lunging, she clamped the sea lion's sharp teeth on the gold rope. Acid pain seared her mouth, making her cry out. The leash dropped from her jaws. Muddled and dizzy, she almost slammed into Broadfoot, missing the duck mole by inches. "She's got Numer!" Dane cried, speaking mind to mind. The duck mole took up the chase, easily keeping pace with her. "That's no she." "Of course it's a she, the scheming wench! A river god, or lake god." Broadfoot fell back slightly, letting her slide by. Rising above Dane, he swept his bill over her eyes. The thing that had stolen Numer bore right in a bright arc, trying to get by its pursuers. It clearly was a thing now. A blobby mass of burned orange and pale lilac that towed the mage not with a gold leash, but with a tentacle of its own flesh. Dane shot across the arc, slamming into Numer. She knocked him aside, but not free. The tentacle was wrapped around his throat. "Again!" urged Broadfoot. Speeding at her friend, Dane prayed she wouldn't break his ribs, and crashed into him. Broadfoot opened his bill and shouted in a voice that filled each drop of water around them. The blob shrieked and dissolved. The peculiar song was cut off. Numer came out of his trance to find himself in deep water. He tried to yell and inhaled liquid. Dane shook her head to clear it of Broadfoot's cry and dove under the man, pushing him up to open air. Taking on her own form, she looped an arm around the choking mage and struck out for the shore. As soon as the water was shallow enough that he could manage, she left him. Racing on to dry land and into a clump of tall reeds, she threw up, rejecting every trace of whatever she had bitten. Wiping her face in wet grass, she saw Broadfoot go by, sweeping his bill over the ground as if he looked for breakfast. Nearby, she could hear Numer doing what she had just done, and decided to give him privacy. Hardly aware that she wore not a stitch, except for the badger's claw and its chain around her neck, she caught up with the duck mole. "Where are you going?" "I want to look at something." Now that they were on land, he spoke as the other animal gods did. "Why didn't you call me?" She stopped, horrified. Why hadn't she summoned him? Red-faced, she said, "I forgot. I'm used to it just being him and me, and I had to move so fast. I'm sorry." The tall reeds opened onto a broad, flat stretch of clay. In it, spilling into the lake, was a pool of shifting tan, pale gray, and blood-red light. Nothing stayed the same for more than a breath. She thought that she saw images, but they changed the moment she focused on them. She leaned closer, drawn by the play of colors. "Wake up!" cried Broadfoot. The girl straightened. She'd come to within a few steps of the pool, and pieces of it had risen in the air to meet her. When she moved back, the raised goo collapsed with plopping sounds like boiling mud. Weakly she asked, Is that a chaos vent?" "It is, and an active one, too." "Activity I don't mind. That's chaos for you. But this..." He wallowed to the water's edge, where the fluid ran to mingle with the lake. "This worries me. It means the whole lake is tainted, and chaos bile is dangerous to us." "Numer's been poisoned?" she gasped, suddenly dizzy with panic. No. It affects only immortals and gods," said Broadfoot. "Mortals are half chaos naturally. He is completely safe, and it sounds like you rid yourself of it before any entered your blood. But..." He paused so long that Dane thought he might have forgotten her. "Broadfoot? It doesn't poison gods or immortals as you would think of poisoning. It brings them closer to Usei. They go from enemies to potential allies. I wish we knew all those who've drunk here. This lake is very popular." Even though he'd said Numer would take no harm from the water he'd inhaled, she wanted to check on him and make sure. Leaving the duck mole beside the chaos vent, she picked her way through the reeds and returned to their camp. There she found the mage, looking the worse for his experience. He sat with his back to her, talking to the badger, who must have arrived while she was off with the duck mole. "I think I hear..." Turning, he blushed scarlet and looked away. She had forgotten she wore only the claw necklace that stayed with her each time that she shape-changed. Oh, she cried. Getting her pack, she went behind a tree. Fumbling with her garments, the girl shouted the details of her talk with Broadfoot. When she emerged, stockings in hand, Numa was close by, ready with her boots. "Are you sure you didn't drink from the lake?" she asked quietly, fixing him with a stern eye. "That creature looked to me like a blue naked female with a big chest until Broadfoot changed my vision. She looked just the kind of female you might want to be tempted by, Master Solomon." He blushed. "I give you my solemn word that I did not drink the lake water and request temptation," he said, combing his wet mane back with his fingers. "I tested it with my gift and sensed there was something very wrong with it. You know, Magelet, the gods may be losing ground against chaos." Broadfoot had arrived and was talking softly to the badger. Hearing the mage, they broke off their conference and came over. "What makes you think so?" asked the badger, dark eyes sharp. "I know my legends and myths," explained the man. "The creators of the universe ordained that the gods, who stand for order, and chaos, who stands for—" "Chaos?" Dane interrupted with a smile. Numer tweaked her nose. "They must stay in balance. The only problem is that it's the nature of each to fight the other. It's written that a day will come when the Queen of Chaos will break free of the prison made for her by her siblings, the great gods. When that day comes, the mortal and divine realms will melt into chaos. The gods, all gods, will perish, as will mortal life." Broadfoot's voice was grim. "You know your legends well, human," remarked the badger. "I have to report this," the Duckmole told them. "It's more than just the lake being poisoned. The creature that had you captive was no part of this place. It was a chaos dweller, masked as a lake being. How one of them managed to escape into the divine realms. You start without me. I'll catch up." Without another word, he vanished. Packing, Dane filled Numer in on what he'd missed while bespelled, as the badger went to examine the vent. Once she was ready, the girl realized that she hadn't seen the Darking. "We have to go," warned Numer. "We can't spend the day searching for it." "I know," replied Dane, searching the grass around them. "I think it does too. I just hope it didn't fall into the lake." When the badger rejoined them, the humans shouldered their packs and returned to the path. There, stark against sandy dirt, was an inky pool. "Is that you?" she asked it. "Did you come back?" The ink split. Half flowed over to her and reached up with a pair of arm-like tentacles. The other half thrust up a part of itself shaped as a head, cocking it to one side. Dane stooped and picked up the one that clearly wanted her to do so. Cupped in her hand, the Darking was light, but still had weight and a presence against her skin. Like a bubble filled with water, she thought. "You brought a friend?" The Darking on her palm grew its own head and nodded. "More of those," grumbled the badger. "Don't they have anything else to do?" Both Darkings shook their heads. Dane smiled. Giving her bow to Numer to hold, she lifted the newcomer in her free hand. "I don't know where you two will sit, though." The first Darking trickled up her arm and curled around her neck, a bit of coolness on her skin. The other flowed over her wrist until it could drip into her belt pouch. "I guess we're set," she told her companions. Numer returned her bow. They set off briskly, Mage and Badger in the lead, Dane bringing up the rear. It was something she and Numer did automatically. She could trust him to pay attention to what was ahead. He knew that she could guard their backs. The Duckmole rejoined them as they stopped for their noon meal. "Not good, not good," he said, pacing the clearing where they sat. "They have placed a ban on the lake, but they won't be looking into the matter of those who have been tainted. I think—" He came to a halt and sighed. "I think it is all they can do to hold the barriers against her." "Then if we can do nothing here, let's be on our way," suggested Numer. "Dane and I would like to go home, where we can do something."